The sky was black when Eli opened his eyes. He smelled fire. His body ached all over. The spaceship had crashed. Sparks flew from the broken panels around him. He could hear metal creaking and something dripping in the dark. He pushed himself up. Pain shooting through his leg. He looked around and saw nothing but twisted wreckage and shadows. He was the only one moving. Is anyone alive? He shouted into the smoke. There was no answer. Just silence and the sound of burning. He reached for his emergency kit and limped out of the broken door. The ground outside was red and rough like dried blood. The moon had two suns, both small and dim in the sky. Strange trees twisted in the distance, like hands reaching for help. Eli had trained for emergency landings, but not like this. He was stranded on a moon not listed in any chart. And worse, he was alone, or so he thought. He walked for hours, dragging his leg, calling out, searching for supplies or survivors. Then he saw something movement behind a rock. He approached carefully, his hand on the small shock pistol at his side. Behind the rock, he found her. A girl clearly alien chained to a metal post sunk deep into the stone. Her skin was pale blue, her body thin and weak, and her eyes were closed. She wasn't dead. He could see her chest rising and falling. Slowly, "Hey," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" No answer. He checked her pulse, barely there. He opened his emergency pack, injecting her with a stim shot. After a few minutes, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at him, confused, then terrified. "It's okay," Eli said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't speak. Instead, she looked down at her chains and then back at him with pleading eyes. Eli frowned. Why was she chained here? Who did this? He didn't ask questions. He pulled out a small laser cutter and started working on the cuffs. They were strong, alien-made, but he managed to weaken the locks. As the chains fell, she collapsed into his arms. He lifted her up and carried her back toward the wreckage. She was light, too light. Someone had starved her at the crash site. He made a small shelter using broken panels. He gave her water and protein paste. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed him closely. That night, as the twin suns faded behind black mountains, Eli stayed awake, watching over her. But she wasn't the only one on the moon. In the morning, Eli found another girl, then another and another, all alien, all female, all injured, and all chained like the first. Some had horns, some had tails, some had fur, but all were in terrible condition. Eli rescued them one by one. He didn't know why they were here, or who left them, but he couldn't leave them. They were scared at first, but slowly, they began to trust him. One girl, a green-skinned warrior type with sharp eyes, finally spoke. "This place is a dumping ground," she said, her voice shaky. "They send females here to be forgotten." Eli felt his chest tighten. These women weren't criminals. They were discarded like trash. And now, somehow, he was in the middle of it. As he treated their wounds and gave them food, something strange began to happen. The alien girls began to heal faster than expected. One of them, barely able to move the day before, was now walking and smiling at him. Their bodies glowed faintly when he touched them. Their eyes lingered on him longer than they should have. They started sitting closer, speaking softer, touching his hand when he passed by. Eli didn't understand. He was just a human medic. Nothing special, but to them, he was something else. Something important. That night, the first girl he saved, the blue-skinned one, spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft and unsure. "You're not like the others," she whispered. "You feel right." Eli stared at her. "What do you mean?" he asked. She just smiled and placed a hand over her stomach. Eli blinked, then looked at the others. They were all watching him silently, all glowing softly under the twin moons. And then he understood. Something had changed. Something was happening to all of them, and he was at the center of it. The air felt heavy when Eli opened his eyes again. He had fallen asleep for only a few minutes, but something had changed. The girls were all awake now, silently gathered around the small shelter. They weren't talking, they weren't blinking. They were just staring at him. His heartbeat slowed. Unsure if he should speak or stay quiet, the blue-skinned girl, the first one he had saved, stepped forward. Her eyes glowed a little brighter than before, and so did the soft outline of her belly. Eli sat up slowly, glancing at the others. Each one had the same soft glow beneath their skin. They looked peaceful, almost calm. But the silence was louder than thunder. "Is something wrong?" Eli asked carefully. The blue girl looked at him and tilted her head, like she didn't fully understand the question. "You touched us," she said simply. "You gave us life." Her voice was soft, but the meaning behind it hit him like a punch to the chest. Another girl stepped forward, the green-skinned one with warrior tattoos along her arms. She knelt in front of him and placed her palm over her stomach. "New heartbeat," she whispered. It wasn't there before. Eli's mouth opened, but no words came out. Was this some alien biology he didn't understand? Some reaction to human DNA? He was no scientist. He was a crash survivor, a medic, nothing more. The girls sat in a circle around him, each one resting a hand on their stomachs. They didn't seem afraid. They looked honored, like something sacred had happened, and somehow he was the reason for it. Eli backed up slightly, not out of fear, but confusion. "This can't be real," he muttered, looking around at the wild alien terrain. "I don't know what you think I did, but I didn't do anything special." The blue girl smiled. "You stayed." The others nodded slowly. "You didn't run. You healed us. You saw us." Their voices blended like a chant. Calm and gentle, Eli didn't know what to say. He was only trying to help. He had no idea it would change them, or him. Suddenly, a loud screech echoed from the sky above. The girls looked up, eyes narrowing. A black shape passed over the moons fast, silent, and shaped like a blade. One of them stood up quickly, pointing. "Hunters." Another said, "They found us." Eli grabbed his small shock pistol and stood in front of them. His hands shook slightly, but he held his ground. The blue girl reached for his arm. "No, not yet. They will test you first." "What does that mean?" he asked. "They won't kill you, not at first. They want to see if you're really the one." He didn't feel like the one at all. He felt like a man stuck in something bigger than he could imagine. But when he looked at their faces, hopeful, trusting, gentle, he couldn't step back. Even if he didn't understand the rules of this moon, even if he didn't know why their bodies changed after he helped them, he knew one thing: he couldn't let them get taken again. A small drone flew low across the rocks, scanning with a red beam. The girls ducked down, but Eli stood tall. The drone locked onto him, beeped, and flashed blue. Then it flew off, vanishing behind a tall ridge. "They marked you," said the warrior girl, standing beside him. "What now?" Eli asked. "They'll come for you," she said, "and maybe us. But we'll fight," said another girl. Gripping her makeshift weapon, Eli felt the weight of their faith on his shoulders. He wasn't strong, he wasn't trained, but they looked at him like he was more than human, and deep inside, he started to feel it too. He turned to them and said, "Then we prepare." For the first time, the girls smiled. And in the fading light of twin moons, they moved like a family, one man and 6 alien girls, all watching the sky, waiting for what would come next. And in the distance, just beyond the red hills, lights began to rise, many lights. Something strange was happening. Eli could feel it in the air, like a quiet vibration running through the walls. The lights in the ceiling pulsed a soft pink, and the alien girls moved slower than usual. They spoke in whispers now, touching their stomachs without realizing it, and everywhere Eli walked, eyes followed him, not with curiosity anymore, but with something deeper, heavier. He stepped into the main chamber looking for Lyra, but instead, he found 5 of the alien girls sitting together on the round floor cushions. They were breathing in rhythm, their hands resting over their lower bellies, their eyes closed, faces calm, as if they were listening to something only they could hear. "What's going on?" Eli asked, feeling a tightness in his chest. None of them answered at first. Then the girl with the green eyes slowly opened hers and looked at him with a small smile. "It's beginning," she whispered. Eli stepped closer, unsure what she meant. "What's beginning?" he asked, but something inside already knew the answer. Before she could reply, one of the girls let out a soft gasp and grabbed her stomach. A glow pale and golden appeared under her skin, like a light pulsing from deep within. The others reached out to support her, whispering calming words in their language. Eli froze, staring in shock as the glow spread down her sides. "Wait, what is that?" he asked, his voice louder now. The girl opened her eyes, locked them with his, and said, "It's your child." The words hit him like a storm. "My... what?" he said, backing up. "Your child is moving," she said again, more softly this time. Eli looked around the room, his heartbeat racing. 2 more girls had the same glow in their bellies. One of them was crying quietly, not from fear, but from joy. Another placed Eli's hand over her stomach, and he felt something shift under his palm. "It's real," she said. "You're our seed bearer." Eli pulled his hand away, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. I didn't do anything," he said, confused and panicked. "You were asleep," one girl said gently, "but your DNA was active. Our healers used it to awaken the cycle." Eli turned in a slow circle, staring at them one by one. "All of you?" he asked, his voice shaking. 7 girls nodded, one after the other. Eli sat down hard, feeling the weight of it crash onto his shoulders. "You made me a father while I was unconscious," he said, looking at Lyra, who had just entered the room. "Yes," she replied calmly. "It was necessary. You had no right," he said, standing again. "I understand your anger," she said. "But our people are fading, and we cannot wait for permission that might never come." Eli didn't know what to say. Anger, confusion, they all twisted inside him like a storm. He looked at the girls again, some smiling, some crying, but all of them looking at him like he was something sacred. He wanted to scream, to run, but something kept his feet still. Then a sudden alarm echoed through the halls. Red light flashed across the ceiling, and a deep voice spoke in their language. All the women stood up at once, some holding their stomachs protectively. Lyra turned to Eli, her eyes sharp. "They're here," she said. "Who?" Eli asked quickly. "Those who believe what we've done is a crime." Before he could ask more, the door opened, and the cloaked girl Nyx stepped in, her face calm but her eyes burning. "They want to take the children," she said. "Even before they're born." Lyra gave orders fast, directing the pregnant girls to safe rooms underground. Nyx stayed by Eli's side, silent and cold. Eli followed them, feeling completely helpless. Not long ago, he was just a man floating through space, forgotten. Now he was the father of 7 unborn children, and a war was about to begin over them. He sat in the small underground room while the walls shook above. Nyx stood guard near the door, holding a silver spear that buzzed with energy. Eli looked at her and asked, "Why are you helping me?" She didn't turn her head, but she answered, "Because they are mine too." Eli stared at her, speechless. Nyx had never touched him, never sat close, never smiled. But now she stood like a shield between him and danger, and her voice had never sounded so human. Above them, the world was burning. Below them, life was beginning. And Eli understood. This was no longer just about him. He had become something more than he ever imagined. He had become their future. Asterisk. The floor was shaking. Eli stood in the center of the hallway, dust falling from above. His hands were bloody, not from fighting, but from holding one of the girls who had just collapsed. She wasn't breathing right, her skin pale, and her belly softly glowing. He shouted for help, but no one answered. Only the alarms answered back, screaming like broken sirens. A door at the far end cracked open, and Lyra ran through with 2 others. They lifted the injured girl quickly and rushed her down a side tunnel. Eli tried to follow, but Lyra blocked his way. "Stay here," she said firmly. "It's not safe anymore." I'm not just going to stand here, Eli growled. She's carrying my child. Lyra's eyes were hard, but her voice softened. I know, but this isn't just about one child. Human, this is about all of them, a loud bang echoed. Through the tunnels, followed by a burst of green light, Eli turned just in time to see a figure step through the smoke. It wasn't like the others. This one had jagged armor and yellow skin that shimmered like metal. He carried a weapon Eli didn't recognize, and his eyes glowed red. Give them to me, the figure said. Eli stepped forward, fists clenched. I don't even know who you are, he said. The armored alien gave a low growl. I am Varnak. Rightful heir to the Voidborn throne, he said. And you have what belongs to my bloodline. Eli didn't move, even as the weapon pointed straight at his chest. These children were not yours to claim, Varnak continued. They were created using stolen genetics. They are abominations. Behind Eli, Nyx appeared like a shadow slipping through. Fire. She raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered with cold energy. They are not abominations, she said quietly. They are ours. Varnak smiled cruelly. Then you'll die with them. Before he could fire, Nyx threw a blade made of blue crystal. It hit Varnak's arm, and the weapon clattered to the ground. Eli grabbed it without thinking, even though he didn't know how it worked. He aimed it, finger over the trigger, his heart pounding in his ears. Don't come closer, he said. Voice shaking but loud, Varnak paused, then laughed. You think you can protect them? All human? He said, stepping closer. You're only one man, and they are many, weak and already dying. Eli felt something burn in his chest, not fear, not anger, but something else. He looked at Nyx, then down the hall where the other girls were. Hiding, he didn't care how strong Varnak was. He would protect them, even if it killed him. He pulled the trigger, and the weapon burst with wild energy. The blast hit Varnak's shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. Nyx rushed forward, slashing with another blade. Fast and silent, Varnak vanished in a blink, using some kind of teleport tech, leaving smoke and blood behind. Eli dropped the weapon, breathing hard. His hands were shaking, but he was still standing. Nyx looked at him for a long second, then nodded. You are not just a father now, she said. You are a shield. Later in the med chamber, Eli sat beside the girl who had collapsed. She was stable now, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She looked up at him with tired eyes and smiled. You came, she whispered. Of course I did, he replied. But even as he sat there, his mind was racing. If Varnak was willing to attack them now, he would return, stronger, faster, and maybe with others. This wasn't over, not even close. Lyra entered quietly, her face unreadable. We've moved them all into the deep chambers, she said. Safer tunnels, more defenses. But they're scared, Eli. They don't know if you'll stay or run. Eli stood up slowly. I'm not going anywhere, he said. They're mine, and I'll fight for every single one. Nyx entered after Lyra, her silver eyes focused. Only on Eli. There's one thing you must understand, she said. Not all danger will come from outside. There are those within our own walls who think we made a mistake. Eli nodded slowly. Then I'll face them too, he said. You can't protect them all. Human, Nyx said. Not without help. He looked at her with steady eyes. Then help me, he said, and for the first time since he arrived. Nyx smiled, even if only a little. The storm had begun, and Eli was ready to stand in the middle of it. Eli sat in silence, staring at the tiny hand resting on his. It was small, soft, barely formed, yet it gripped his finger like it had known him forever. The baby had been born too early, but somehow it survived, wrapped in glowing cloth, and held carefully in Nyx's arms. The child made no sound, just breathed, slow and peaceful. Eli's heart ached in a way he didn't understand. The others gathered around slowly, their eyes wide, not with fear but wonder. This was the first child born of a human and an alien mother. Not a weapon, not a test subject, not a secret, a life. A child that smiled when he touched her cheek. "I thought she wouldn't make it," whispered the mother Kella, her wings shaking from exhaustion. "But she did," Ellie replied, voice low. The moment felt sacred, like the universe had paused to watch. But not everyone was smiling. Lyra stood by the entrance with a cold expression, arms crossed tightly. "She was born weak," she said flatly. "Barely survived. She may not last a cycle." Eli turned to her slowly. "You say that like..." "She's a failed experiment," he said. "She's not. She's my daughter." Lyra didn't reply, but her jaw tightened. The other girls said nothing either, but the silence spoke loudly. There was a divide growing between those who believed in the mission and those who believed in him. Later, Eli sat alone in the meditation chamber. It was quiet here, with floating lights drifting above like soft stars. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to breathe, but the weight on his chest was too heavy. He didn't ask for this life, didn't plan to be some chosen breeder for a fading race. But now there was a child, and she had his eyes. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft but certain. Nick sat down beside him without a word. For a long moment, they just stared ahead. Then she spoke. "You look like someone who wants to disappear," she said. Eli smiled weakly. "Wouldn't be the first time," he replied. She leaned her head back against the stone. "I used to think we only needed your body," she said. "Your seed, your strength. But then I watched you hold that baby, and I realized we were wrong." Eli looked at her, unsure. "You're more than just a breeder, Eli," she said. "You're the only thing holding this fragile dream together." He didn't know what to say, so Nick stood up, and before walking away, she added something that stayed with him. "You gave her a reason to live." That night, the lights in the cave changed color. Soft blue became pale orange. It was a signal, a warning. Another baby was on the way. This time it was Ivra, and her labor came fast. Too fast. Eli and the others gathered quickly, trying to help. But something was wrong. The healers whispered to each other, nervous. The baby wasn't moving. Ivra screamed once, then went silent. Eli pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside her. He held her hand and whispered her name. Her eyes fluttered, and she whispered, "Back, don't let them take him." "Who?" Eli asked, panicked. "Varnak," she gasped. "He wants the baby." And then her body tensed as a flash of light erupted from her stomach. Everyone stepped back, covering their eyes. When the light faded, a child lay there, glowing faintly blue, breathing calmly, but beside him, a mark had been burned into the stone floor. 3 claws, surrounded by a circle. Lyra saw it and paled instantly. "The mark of claim," she whispered. "He's already been chosen." Before birth, Eli grabbed the baby and held him close. "No one takes him," he growled. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Varnak hadn't just disappeared. He had been watching, waiting, and now he had marked one of the children as his. Later, as the girls slept and the babies lay in warmth, Eli stood at the cave's entrance. He stared into the darkness, fists clenched. He didn't know how many more were coming, or how long he could protect them all. But he wasn't just a donor, a tool, or a name in a lab file. He was their father, and he was ready to fight for every heartbeat they gave him. The alarm didn't scream, it roared. Lights turned red, then white, then died completely. The protective cave dimmed to shadows, and a deep rumble echoed through the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling like dry rain, and the pregnant girls looked around in fear. Eli was already moving. He grabbed the spear Nix left by the hatch and ran through the corridor. His bare feet slapped against the stone as shouts and strange screeches filled the air. Then came the sound that turned his blood to ice. A cry, sharp and sudden, not of pain but of labor. Talai. She was on her knees, clutching her belly, her body shaking. "The baby's coming," she cried, her voice torn between fear and strength. Eli froze, torn between instinct and panic. The enemy was here, but so was new life. Nix appeared behind him, sword drawn, eyes sharp. "They're attacking the entrance," she said. "We need to move her now." 2 other girls ran forward and helped lift Talai. She winced with every step, her face pale, sweat pouring down her temples. Eli led the way through the escape tunnel, gripping his spear tightly. The noise behind them grew louder. Closer. They didn't have much time. Then a sudden tremor threw them off balance. The ground split in two just ahead, revealing a jagged gap. They couldn't jump it, not while carrying Talai. Eli turned fast and looked at a narrow side tunnel. "There," he said. "We go there." But Nyx grabbed his shoulder. "I'll lead them away," she said, already running before he could argue. "No." He shouted, but her cloak disappeared into the dark. He wanted to chase her, but Talai groaned, falling again. "I can't wait," she whispered. "It's happening now." The others lay her down quickly. Forming a wall around her, Eli knelt by her side, placing both hands on hers. "You're strong," he said softly. "We'll get through this." Screams echoed down the corridor, metallic and furious. Eli knew the enemy was closer than ever. He stood, his body tense, heart thudding. In his chest, the first enemy entered the space, a tall armored being with glowing red veins pulsing through its limbs. It spotted the group instantly and raised its weapon. Eli didn't think. He charged, spear in hand. Screaming with everything he had left, the tip struck true, right through the creature's neck. It collapsed with a screech, but 2 more followed. Ivra joined him then, throwing a pulse grenade. Rin stepped forward with her green flame, pushing the invaders back behind them. Talai cried out as another contraction hit. "She's crowning." Miri shouted, voice high and panicked. Kala dropped beside her, using her own body to shield the mother from falling dust. "Push, Talai, just push," she said. The battle raged just feet away, and a new life struggled to enter the world. Eli fought like a wild animal, his muscles screaming, eyes bloodshot. Every time a new attacker fell, another took its place. But he refused to let them pass. A shrill cry pierced the air, louder than the blasters, louder than the screams. Everyone froze, even the invaders. A baby's cry, newborn lungs screaming. To the universe that life had begun, Talai sobbed with joy, her face glowing from sweat and tears. Miri held the child close, cradling the tiny creature with awe. "It's a girl," she whispered. "She's perfect." The invaders hesitated, but only for a second. Then they charged again. Eli stepped in front of them, blocking their path. But he was out of strength, out of weapons, out of time. Suddenly, a beam of blue light burst through the ceiling. The enemy was blasted off their feet, their armor melting. Under the blast, Nyx dropped into the room like a shadow, her hands crackling with power. She didn't say a word, only moved, fast and brutal, cutting down every last one of them. When it was over, the only sound was the soft cooing of the baby. "Girl." Eli fell to his knees, panting. Tylee smiled at him. "She came during the war," she said. "She didn't wait. She came through fire." Eli said softly, looking at the child. "She'll never be afraid of it." Outside the cave, the dawn finally broke. The world was still burning, but here, inside the stone, there was light, there was new life, and there was something worth fighting for again. The battlefield was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps, no cries, no smoke, no wind. Only the sound of Eli breathing, slow and deep, as he lay in the middle of the broken stone path. Blood stained his side, but his hand stayed firm over the tiny heartbeat. Beneath his chest, he had fallen during the last wave, his body crushed between broken steel and fire, but he didn't let go of the baby. Not for a second. Around him, the alien women stood like a circle of stone, fierce, silent, watching the smoke clear. Ivra's shield shimmered faintly. Almost gone. Kala's wing was torn, but she kept it wrapped protectively around 2 newborns. Nyx stood in the middle, her cloak gone, her blade broken, her hair wet with sweat and blood. No one said anything. They just stared at him. Their human, their partner, their protector. The baby in his arms whimpered softly, her eyes barely open. Eli smiled through pain, whispering, "It's okay, little one. The women finally moved toward him, slowly. Like water returning to the shore after a storm, Miri knelt first. Touching his hand, "Let us take her, you need rest," she said, voice shaking, but Eli shook his head. "She's safe with me," he whispered. She was never afraid. The others surrounded him, kneeling, crouching, sitting close. They touched his shoulders, his back, his legs, making sure he was still whole, still real. One by one, they placed their hands over his heart, not for healing, but for connection. "You gave us something we forgot," Eva said softly. "You reminded us we were more than survivors," said Rin. "You stayed when others would have run," said Talai, her daughter resting in her lap. "You bled for us," Nyx whispered, "and now we bleed for you." Eiley looked around at them, exhausted, broken, but more alive than he'd ever been. He had never asked for this life, never planned to become a father, a fighter, a symbol, but he was here now, surrounded by women who didn't want his power. They wanted his presence. They wanted him. "I didn't know what love looked like," he said quietly. "Not until I saw all of you holding our children." Miri leaned her head on his shoulder. "Maybe the stars didn't forget us," she whispered. "Maybe they just waited for you." The air shifted then, soft and warm. The morning sun finally touched the edge of the cave ruins, bathing them in golden light. Above them, the sky was no longer red, but clear and open. For the first time in cycles, it felt like peace had returned. Jace stood slowly, holding the child carefully in his arms. He faced the open land, burned and battered, but free. Behind him, his family rose with him, strong and proud. Nyx stepped to his side and said something she had never said before. "Wherever you go, we go too." He turned to them, looking into their tired but glowing eyes. "You don't belong to me," he said. "We belong to each other." They nodded, and one by one, the children were lifted into the sun. Tiny hands reaching upward, as if they already understood. They were born in fire, in fear, in battle, but they were here, alive and loved. A soft breeze passed through the trees beyond. It carried no alarms, no machines, no enemy steps, only the promise of something new, a future not built in a lab or carved by war, but made with hearts, hands, and hope. As the group walked slowly into the green beyond, Ailey glanced over his shoulder one last time at the cave, where pain and blood and miracles had lived together, where he had found not just purpose, but family. The cave had been a shelter, but these people, these mothers, these warriors, these daughters, they were his home now. And as the children laughed for the first time under a peaceful sun, Eli smiled and whispered, "We are not alone anymore." Because now he understood he wasn't just the one they saved, he was the reason. They survived, and in the heart of a burned world, a human and his alien family had finally begun to live.